So as I was introduced, I'm Chris, that's the same. dataxu, however, is definitely changing in a pretty big way. And so this is actually the very first time I've had a chance in front of anybody to say it, but I don't work for dataxu anymore. I work for Roku. Because as of Friday of last week, at about 4 o'clock, Roku bought dataxu. And there's some things that will probably come much later on down the line, but everything that we're going to talk about here today is exactly the same. All of the same great services from dataxu can still be expected to continue in the future. But it's sort of the elephant in the room if you actually know about our company or maybe follow the markets or anything like that. So you'll see orange all around here. That's old dataxu colors. You now have collector's items because they will no longer be distributed anywhere anymore. Purple is something we're going to have to start to get used to. But what we wanted to talk about today was not about dataxu or Roku, really, but rather something that we know a lot about, both of our companies collectively, and that's connected TV. And specifically about who watches connected TV, and just a general overview and knocking down some common misconceptions and just talking about buzzwords in general, because it can be a really pretty complicated topic, especially when you think about all the different ways that people talk about connected TV. So as a good way to get started, something that we like to refer to as buzzword bingo, just talking about some acronyms that you've probably heard and maybe describing what are some of the differences between them. So I like to start with OTT. That's really the broadest of all of the connected TV terms. Stands for over the top and is generally more of an umbrella for what you could think about in the connected or digital TV space. And really, it just stands for anything that is in addition to or literally over the top of your traditional TV services. But then breaking it down a little bit further, there's groups that can fall into. And connected TV specifically, the CTV acronym, would be a form of OTT where you're actually watching it on a big screen. The TV that's in your living room, the TV that's in your bedroom, versus your laptop, your tablet, or your phone. And that's where FEP comes into play. Standing for full episode player, this would generally cover anything else in the OTT space that you're not actually watching on the big screen itself. But then going even further, there's some more complicated acronyms that you may have seen, you may have heard. Maybe this is the first time. My favorite is VMVPD, which is a complicated acronym, or it's a complication on an already complicated acronym, I should say. So first, MVPD, multi-channel video programming distributor. You want to think of this as your cable or your satellite companies, like some of our friends from Dish are here today. A VMVPD is just a virtual version of that. So if you think of Dish as a MVPD, Sling would be a virtual MVPD. Same concept, still bringing to you live TV quality content, but without all the same infrastructure you'd expect from traditional cable or satellite. The big sticker here is that live aspect and the fact that you can actually sign in and get a guide and see what's on right now, as well as some on-demand content, which is where the other two come from, SVOD and AVOD. Subscription-based video on demand is exactly what it sounds like. It brings you connected TV content that you can watch whenever you want on your own time, but you need an actual subscription in order to get access to it. In most cases, there's not going to be ads, although in some cases they have models where depending on how much you pay for access to it, you might still get some ads. And that's what brings us to AVOD, which is the exact same thing, but just ad-supported. In most cases, you are able to access this for free and be able to watch whenever you want. So most common SVOD, everybody probably knows, Netflix. A very common ad-supported video on demand, something that's becoming more well-known is a company called Pluto TV. That's totally free. You just log in. You can watch the content that they have available. It's a property of Viacom, and you'll get ads along the way. So just knocking all of those out to begin with, I want to talk about a little bit about the growth of connected TV specifically. So in this case, we're talking about actual television screens, not just what you might see on your phone or your tablet or computer. And whenever I do this, I like to reference a report from ComScore, which is the numbers that you see here. And it's just showing households in the US that are watching connected TV. And the reason why I like that ComScore report so much is it's not just a count of connected devices or people that own those devices. Rather, this is households that have a connected TV and actually use it to watch TV. So for instance, if you bought a Vizio TV over the past few years, that's a connected TV. But if you just plugged in Comcast or Spectrum to it, you might not be a connected TV viewer. And these numbers specifically are talking about people who actually watch connected TV. So it's really the most actionable for everyone in this room to actually understand what the footprint looks like. It is something that has grown significantly in usage, especially in the time-shifted realm. This is still data from that same ComScore report, something that comes out once every year. The latest was in June, I believe. And what you see here is that connected TV viewership has now surpassed the sum of DVR and video on demand for time-shifted viewership in terms of hours per month. But then the question always comes, who is actually going to see your ad on connected TV? Because for all that the ComScore report does, it still just speaks to connected TV at large. And as we know, Netflix, it's very popular, but it's not going to help any of us in here because we can't put our ads in the middle of House of Cards, for instance. So what we would always at dataxu talk about is how does this actually impact us as a platform that brings ads to people? And what's the gap between that ComScore data and elsewhere? And so we decided to look into it ourselves because we run a significant amount of media through our platform, and we have the analytics to figure that out. So talking about ad-supported connected TV specifically, we have the ability to see over 15 billion ad opportunities every month, something that grows about 20% quarter over quarter, and can be seen in 45 million unique households on a monthly basis. So that gap that you think about from the number I put up a moment ago to this is all of those folks exclusively watching subscription video on demand as opposed to ad-supported, but still a fairly significant number that's seeing really high increases year over year. Next, this is something that is by far the most surprising to me. It kind of shattered some illusions that people had about connected TV, which is that you assume connected TV is cord cutters, people who've ditched cable and they've moved on to a new form of watching television. And while that is true and probably is the genesis of all of this, what we say is cord cutting started a movement, but cord stacking is the norm. And cord stacking is this concept of a connected TV viewer who still has and watches traditional linear TV. So with 23 million households in that 45 number that I just showed before, it is over 50% that are actually in the camp of still watching both of these different forms of media, and to some pretty significant extent. So as you can see here, an average of 14 hours per week still being viewed on linear TV amongst connected TV viewers. Where are these people actually watching? And the answer is everywhere. The takeaway from this heat map is not where is it red and where is it blue. It's the fact that there's no white spots at all. Connected TV viewership is coming from all 210 Nielsen DMAs. It is not something that you need to worry about only being in the larger East and West Coast cities. It really is active everywhere to a pretty significant scale. And then the question of who is watching, and I have a whole bunch of demographic stats that I'm going to run through in a second, but generally they all come back to this theme of connected TV viewers can't really be put in a box. You can't necessarily put up a slide and say, this is going to reach this niche audience. Connected TV is your best way to find millennials, for instance, or Gen Z. Because what you'll see is there's, for instance, a fairly equitable split from a gender perspective. And some obvious trends as far as age goes, but you have representation from basically every age group. And probably what was another surprising stat for a lot of people is if you were to add up those bars in the 55 plus category, it's just about 19% of all of the connected TV ad opportunities that we see on our platform from a senior citizen perspective. And I know that that was something that was very surprising to a lot of people. Just continuing down the line, again, you'll see some skews, but the takeaway really being that there's representation across the board. So all different types of household incomes. You have owners, you have renters, different ethnic backgrounds, education levels, all represented here. Again, in many cases, there's a skew, but there's representation across the board, and really bringing to light this idea that connected TV can be a way to reach the masses. Just continuing on, marital status, presence of children, fairly equitable in a lot of different categories. And you can go all the way down the line. These are just the things that we thought would be most generally interesting to people. This is the type of data, though, that in connected TV you can figure out for are they my customers? Are they my competitors' customers? And so on and so forth. But then we also ask, when are they watching? Is the viewing habit any different than traditional TV? And generally speaking, it's not. There's a lot of bars here and a lot of different times. But if you think about it, it makes general sense. People watch TV when people are free to watch TV. So you have it at the lowest overnight. It starts to grow throughout the day, and it peaks during traditional prime time, that 8 to 11. Still high viewership in the late night period, and then just starts over again the next day, and so on. And throughout the week, you see fairly regular viewing habits from a weekday perspective, and then on the weekend you have a spike because obviously we have more free time. This is where you're going to find your binge viewing, and just generally, if you're available to watch TV, that's when you're going to watch TV. And that's sort of like the theme of this discussion whenever I have it is things that seem obvious are obvious because connected TV has come to a point where it's not a specific group of people. But I want to take a little bit of a deeper look at the cord stackers specifically because this is, again, as I said, the biggest surprise to us when we looked at it is the fact that this group actually is the majority in connected TV viewership. So just a quick refresh, the cord stacker is somebody who watches connected and linear TV. It's about 58% of the CTV households that are consuming ad-supported TV still watching linear as well. And again, something that was very surprising to me anyway, because I was clinging to my cord cutter themes and ideas, is that we assumed it was going to be mostly people watching free over-the-air TV. You can put the antenna and still get your local channels, right? Well, as you see here, the vast majority of people are actually still watching some form of pay TV, whether it's satellite or cable, and then a much smaller group that is getting it from broadcast. So a lot of surprises in this data, which actually shouldn't have been that surprising because I am one of these people. I watch in multiple different ways. I don't know why I thought that I would be any different than anybody else, but it seems to be that this is really quite common for viewership. But we like to break down the cord stackers into two groups based on how much they actually watch linear television. So we have a light and a heavy group, which is determined on whether you watch more or less than 7 hours of linear TV specifically per week. And as you can see, it's heavily dominated by those that are watching a smaller amount of linear TV. But when you think about the fact that this group on average watches 14 hours per week, you can then see that the minority are significant power users of television. They watch a lot. It's the kind of thing that when you see something like this, you have to think about, what's my strategy for frequency management on television? Also breaking down the light and the heavy a little bit further into the days of week that they watch, just trying to find patterns. What's the easiest way to try to tell these people apart? And what we found is that the light viewers are very selective of when they're actually going to be watching TV, 10 days a month, basically here and there, whenever it makes sense for them, whereas the heavy viewers are watching pretty much every day. Colors on this slide are a little weird, but just follow me. The orange means that you watch more, and the purple or the darker means you watch less. And the takeaway here, what we found is that amongst all cord stackers, they actually did have a pattern for when they watched it from a weekly perspective, which is to say more linear TV was consumed during the weekday and more connected TV on the weekends, which again can make sense if you think about the concept of time-shifted viewing and appointment television. There's a lot more of that taking place during the week, and that's when you're going to be consuming your linear TV if you are still watching it. But interestingly, on a day-to-day basis, it's almost the same. People watch linear TV and connected TV in the same manner because, as I put it, it's all just TV. We put the C in front of it, we put the L in front of it to describe how they're getting it, but ultimately we, as we know, because we are the people that we're talking about, just watch television. So as a takeaway, like, what really can be learned from this? First and foremost, the scale of connected TV has reached a tipping point. I've given talks like this for a couple years now, and in the past, the #1 talking point and the first question everybody asks is what's the scale? Can I actually run a national campaign? Can I run local campaigns? And it was all we ever wanted to talk about was how much is actually out there. And so takeaway, yes, there is plenty of connected TV available. You can run full-size television campaigns, whether it's fully national or even specifically regional. And so that could be for the really important aspect if you're only selling your products in a particular area. You obviously don't want to have waste elsewhere. But even if you are selling nationally, you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to test and learn from different areas or just heavy up in different markets. Connected TV actually does have the scale now to do that, not just in major cities, but in cities all across the US. And it's gone mainstream. Every connected TV presentation, including my own, I'm guilty of this, several years ago, would have a picture of a guy with a beanie sitting in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, and he's a very specific archetype. So like we talked about personas before. The idea was you use connected TV to reach that guy or that girl, and that's really not the case anymore. You would be amazed at the data that people throw into our platform to target specific people. I'm talking about left-handed nurses who have been to my website in the last 2 days and purchased a competitive product. People are actually running those campaigns. Or my favorite demographic target that somebody added, people who are interested in realism. And realism, what the heck does that mean? They like authenticity. So I don't exactly know who's not interested in authenticity, but it's out there and you can find those people if you want. But finally, and this is probably the most important one and goes back to the misconceptions and the things that certainly surprised me, is while connected TV is the absolute best way to make up for lost reach in linear TV, if you want a large screen branded message, it's not a given that you're going to find incremental reach just by running a connected TV campaign because of the fairly significant overlap that still exists between the two. So like I said, I didn't come here to talk about dataxu or Roku specifically. This is an area that we would be able to help you in, but no matter who you work with in the connected TV space, keep this Venn diagram in mind and think to yourself, is what I'm doing actually incremental? Am I finding new people, or am I just overlapping something that I've been doing for decades and showing more and more ads to the same people over and over? So that's it for my time. Enjoy your rest of your lunch, and I think we might have a minute or two for questions, and then everyone can head off to activities.
You got it. Big round of applause for Chris. Chris, well done. Thank you. Any questions for Chris before we let him off the hook? Any questions? Any questions? Lots of info there. Chris, you have a team with you as well here, correct?
Yeah, it's myself and Devin, who's over there. We will be playing golf today and likely tomorrow also, so if you're there, find us, and we'll be at all the other activities.